Good afternoon and welcome to Worldview. Today we take an in-depth look at Greenland, the world's largest island, a land of ice and snow. Greenland may seem remote, but it has long been at the center of global politics, from strategic military importance and rare minerals to climate change and the eyes of powerful nations. Greenland's story is one of influence, ambition, and sovereignty. In this special report, we explore why Greenland matters, why the United States, alongside other countries, continues to pay close attention. My name is John James. This is Worldview on Spectrum TV. Greenland has been part of the Kingdom of Denmark for centuries. Its modern geopolitical importance began during World War II. In 1941, after Germany occupied Denmark, the United States established a presence on Greenland to prevent the island from falling under Nazi control. During the Cold War, Greenland became even more critical. In 1951, the US and Denmark signed an agreement allowing the construction of Thule Air Base, now known as Pituffik Space Base. In northwestern Greenland, the base remains operational today, monitoring missile activities, tracking satellites, and supporting Arctic surveillance. Greenland made headlines again in recent years. On January 8, 2026, U.S. President Donald Trump publicly renewed his interest in acquiring Greenland. He described the island as strategically essential, even suggesting the United States could act whether they like it or not. This was reported by newsmen and other major international news outlets. Let's take a listen.
I'm not talking about money for Greenland yet. I might talk about that. But right now, we are going to do something on Greenland, whether they like it or not. Because if we don't do it, Russia or China will take over Greenland, and we're not going to have Russia or China as a neighbor. I would like to make a deal, the easy way, but if we don't do it the easy way, we're going to do it the hard way. And by the way, I'm a fan of Denmark too. I have to tell you, and they've been very nice to me. I'm a big fan, but the fact that they had a boat land there 500 years ago doesn't mean that they own the land. I'm sure we had lots of boats go there also. But we need that because if you take a look outside of Greenland right now, there are Russian destroyers, there are Chinese destroyers and bigger, there are Russian submarines all over the place. We're not going to have Russia or China occupy Greenland, and that's what they're going to do if we don't.
Trump framed his remarks in terms of national security, noting Greenland's location as critical for monitoring Arctic routes and countering the influence of Russia and China. While the idea was controversial, it brought renewed international attention to the island's strategic value. Greenland's political leaders responded firmly. All five parties in Greenlandic Parliament issued a joint statement declaring, "We don't want to be Americans. We want to be Greenlanders." Officials emphasized that Greenland is not for sale, and any decision about its future must be made by Greenlanders themselves.
Grønland ikke til salg. I dag har vi drøftet vores samarbejde mellem Grønland og Danmark. Jeg skal understrege, at Grønland en del af kongeriget. Vi en retsstat baseret på demokratiske værdier, og vi har selvstyre under kongeriget Danmark. Situationen meget, meget, meget alvorlig. Og de geopolitiske interesser, de har lagt et kæmpestort pres på vores land og dens befolkning. Grønland vil ikke ejes af USA. Grønland vil ikke styres af USA. Grønland vil ikke være en del af USA. Vi vælger det Grønland, vi kender i dag, og som er en del af kongeriget Danmark. Nu står vi med en geopolitisk krise, og hvis vi skal vælge mellem USA og Danmark her og nu, så vælger vi Danmark. Vi vælger NATO, vi vælger kongeriget Danmark, vi vælger EU. Tiden er ikke inde til interne diskussioner og splittelse. Tiden er til at stå sammen og få bygget videre på det fællesskab, vi kender, og til det, vi ønsker. Grønland er som en del af kongeriget Danmark medlem af NATO. Vi har stor tiltro til NATO-alliancen. Og ved at NATO støtter os i den her...
Why does the United States want Greenland? Geography explains much. Greenland sits between the North America and Europe, directly along the shortest flight and missile path to Russia. Pitufik Space Base allows early warning surveillance of missile activity, satellite tracking and Arctic monitoring. U.S. interest in long-standing. The first U.S. military survey team arrived in June 1946 to assess potential base locations. By the 1950s, Greenland was central to America's early warning and defense strategy in the Arctic. Greenland sits between North America and Europe, directly along the shortest flight and missile path between the United States and Russia. For decades, the U.S. has maintained a military presence here. Pitufik Space Base, formerly known as Thule Air Base, plays a critical role in America's early warning systems, monitoring ballistic missile activities and tracking objects in space. U.S. officials argue that as long as global security threats persist, Greenland's location makes it essential to America and Allied defense planning. Let's also talk about climate change. Climate change is one of the reasons the U.S. are interested in the Greenland. A new dimension to Greenland's significance is climate. The island's ice sheet is melting at record rate, reshaping the Arctic. Retreating glaciers, rising sea levels, and accessible new shipping routes have intensified global interest. According to the National Snow and Ice Data Center, Greenland loses approximately 200 billion tons of ice per year, opening new maritime pathways and increasing access to previously unreachable resources. This transformation is both environmental and strategic, increasing Greenland's importance on the global stage. Greenland's ice sheet is melting at record rate. This opens new shipping routes and access to minerals, increasing international interest. The melting ice also raises environmental and indigenous concerns. In the meantime, beneath Greenland's ice lie vast deposits of rare earth minerals, essential for electronics, renewable energy, and advanced military technologies. With much of the global supply dominated by China, Greenland presents a potential alternative for the United States and its allies. Mining projects, however, are controversial. Greenlanders are concerned about environmental damage, social impact, and long-term sustainability of resource extractions. Currently, much of the global supply comes from China, making Greenland a potential alternative source for the U.S. and its allies. Greenland sits at the center of Arctic geopolitics. Russia has expanded military bases in the region. China, describing itself as a near-Arctic state, has invested in infrastructure and research stations. For the United States, Greenland is a strategic location for monitoring Russia and Chinese activities, protecting shipping lanes, and maintaining early warning capabilities. J.D. Vance, speaking to journalists, have asked them to take Donald Trump seriously on acquiring Greenland. Let's take a listen from J.D. Vance.
Concerning Venezuela, how would you assure the Caribbean region that they will remain a zone of peace? Because some member states in the region are concerned.
Well, look, the president had a very productive phone call with the president of Colombia yesterday, and we continue to talk at all levels of government with a number of our friends in the Caribbean region. I actually think this is really good for peace in the Caribbean, because when you take away a major source of illegal cartel revenue, which is the cocaine trade, the fentanyl trade, other sources of illicit revenue, you actually remove the power of one of the main destabilizing forces in Latin America and in the Caribbean. I really do think, look, we say it all the time, this is the president of peace. One of the ways that you establish peace in your own hemisphere is to make it clear that the United States is going to be respected, that the United States is willing to take power away from criminal cartel organizations and give it to legitimate governments. That's how we see the future of the Western Hemisphere, and we think it's going to be much more peaceful than it was certainly under Joe Biden. I'll take one more question. Go ahead.
Mr. Vice President, thank you. On Greenland, do you have a message for European leaders? Many in Europe reject the idea that the island could be for sale.
Well, first of all, Secretary Rubio, I believe, is meeting with the leaders of Denmark and Greenland next week, I want to say it is, but maybe it's the week after that. We'll continue to deliver some of these messages in private, some of them in public, but I guess my advice to European leaders and anybody else would be to take the President of the United States seriously. What has he said about Greenland? Set to the side the crazy overreactions that I've seen from the press and from certain people in Europe. What has the President said? Number one, Greenland is really important, not just to America's missile defense, but to the world's missile defense. Number two, we know that there are hostile adversaries that have shown a lot of interest in that particular territory, that particular slice of the world. So what we're asking our European friends to do is to take the security of that landmass more seriously, because if they're not, the United States is going to have to do something about it. What that is, I'll leave that to the president as we continue to engage in diplomacy with our European friends and everybody on this particular topic. And again, thank you all for listening. Thanks for taking questions. And I just ask you, look, this is politics, and often Republicans and get in arguments with the press about things. And I understand that.
Meanwhile, the Danish foreign minister says there is still a fundamental disagreement with the U.S. over Greenland after White House talks. Les Lucas described the talks with the U.S. Vice President and Secretary of State as frank and constructive, but in a joint news conference with the Greenlandic foreign minister, he said it was absolutely not necessary for the U.S. to acquire the Arctic territory.
Quite a few questions at the same time. Well, I have known the president for quite a while, also in my former capacity as Prime Minister in Denmark, and I know his approach. But I must say, and even though he addressed things quite differently from what I would have done myself, there's also always a bit of truth in what he's saying, not about the dog sleighs. Well, we also have dog sleighs to our special forces. That's the way to, otherwise you couldn't come around in the northern part of Greenland. But I must say that, of course, we share to some extent his concerns. There is definitely a new security situation in the Arctic and the high north. All of us, transatlantic, took the peace dividend years ago. And we have the vision of keeping Arctic as a low-tension region. That's probably also why U.S. themselves have decided to have a much softer footprint in Greenland. During the Cold War, at some stage, they had 17 different military installations and military bases. Now they only have one. They had like 10,000 personnel in Greenland. Now they have around 200. That's not our decision, that's a US decision. And now the situation is entirely different. And of course we have to respond to this. The big difference is whether that must lead to a situation where US acquire Greenland, and that is absolutely not necessary. I mean, we have the long-lasting diplomatic relation, the longest-lasting diplomatic relation with US that any US ally has, 225 years in a row. And we have a perfect framework which could be used. And therefore, to answer your question, even though we wasn't so successful that we reached, a conclusion where our American colleagues said, "Oh, sorry, it was a totally misunderstanding. We gave up on our ambitions." There's clearly a disagreement. We agreed that it makes sense to try to sit down on a high level to explore whether there is possibilities to accommodate.
Meanwhile, EU Foreign Policy Chief Kaja Kallas and Germany Defense Minister Boris Pistorius faced tough questions in Berlin over Donald Trump's threat to acquire Greenland, as well as Ukraine and Iran. Kallas warned Russia doesn't want peace, said Europe is planning military and civilian missions, and confirmed EU talks with Denmark on how to respond if US pressure on Greenland escalates.
The problem is that we don't have ceasefire. Right now, there's nothing to monitor. But in the coalition of the willing, of course, we are preparing also on the European side what we can bring to the table. We already have the military mission training Ukrainian soldiers, and we can extend that mandate also to do the training on Ukrainian soil. We also have the civilian mission to help Ukrainian to reform their defense forces and help with the capacity building. But again, coming to my beginning of my answer is that the problem is right now that there is no ceasefire and unfortunately not ceasefire in sight as well, because Russia clearly doesn't want peace. Thank you.
Frau von Sky News, Frau Robbins.
Sky News. The same question for both of you, actually. First of all, on Iran, Chancellor Merz says that the regime is in its final days. How confident are you, if that's true, that what comes next will actually be better? And also on Greenland, Donald Trump seems fairly set on his ambitions when it comes to Greenland at the moment. How far is Europe prepared to go to prevent the US from taking it over?
Speaking at the European Parliament on Tuesday, NATO Secretary General Mark Rutte was asked about President Donald Trump's threat to invade Greenland, which belongs to the United States ally Denmark. We'll take a quick break right now. When we return, the spotlight will still be on Greenland. This is Worldview. Don't go nowhere. Many thanks for staying tuned. We are still on a special report about Greenland. A 15-strong French military contingent have arrived in Greenland's capital, Nuuk, as several European states sent soldiers there as part of a so-called reconnaissance mission. The deployment, to which will also include personnel from Germany, Sweden, Norway, the Netherlands and the UK, comes as US President Donald Trump continues to press his claim to the Arctic island, which is a semi-autonomous part of Denmark. French President Emmanuel Macron said the initial contingent would be reinforced soon with land, air and sea assets.
Et au fond, il pourrait y avoir un côté complètement naïf, irénique, à vous dire qu'on va s'occuper de la gouvernance internationale au moment où je suis en train de vous dire que c'est le désordre le plus grand, la loi du plus fort, et que chaque jour les gens se demandent si le Groenland va être envahi, si le Canada sera soumis à la menace de devenir le 51e État ou autre, ou si Taïwan sera encerclé davantage. Les États-Unis sont une puissance établie, mais qui se détourne progressivement de certains de ses alliés et s'affranchit de règles internationales qu'elle promouvait encore récemment, qu'il s'agisse du commerce, de certains éléments de sécurité ou de certaines enceintes.
The messages that we hear regarding Greenland are extremely concerning, and we have had discussions also among the Europeans. You know, if this is a real threat, and if it is, then what would be our response?
Es ist vollkommen klar, über das Schicksal Grönlands entscheiden die Grönländerinnen und Grönländer und das Königreich Dänemark, zu dessen Hoheitsgebiet Grönland gehört. Die in der UN-Charta festgeschriebenen Prinzipien der Souveränität, der territorialen Integrität.
The movement of military personnel comes after Denmark and Greenland's foreign ministers traveled to Washington for a meeting with U.S. Vice President J.D. Vance on Wednesday. Trump, meanwhile, doubled down on his bid to bring Greenland under U.S. control, telling reporters in the Oval Office, "We need Greenland for national security." The White House also said the deployment of European troops in Greenland has no impact on U.S. President Donald Trump's plans to take control of the Arctic island from Denmark. This is how far we can come on our show today on Worldview. To ensure to follow us on social media, subscribe to our YouTube channel, all of which you can find on our website at spectrumtvlive.ng. You have been watching Worldview on Spectrum TV. Do enjoy the rest of your day. Bye for now.